want to thank the Kenyan government and personally President Ruto for his leadership and vision in bringing us here together. And I want special recognition for Minister Soipan Tuya for her work and efforts in helping to organize both the summit and the climate weeks. This summit for Africa, by Africa, will help us tackle the climate crisis we see and feel all around the world. I speak to you today not just as the head of the UNFCCC, but as the former minister from a developing country. So let us talk about what we can do to stabilize the climate and build resilient societies in Africa and throughout the world. Development is, as it should be, a priority. I know personally the destruction that climate-related disasters can wreak on years of development. But the world is asking for a lot. Develop, but don't do it in the carbon-intensive way that we did in the past. Therefore, it is a global responsibility to collectively work out how we do that. Every day this week, we'll be putting our heads together to discuss how to build resilience to climate risks, transition to a low-emission economy, and collaborate on solutions, transforming our economies through a just transition that benefits all sectors of society. Africa, the equal partner in this endeavor, is offering its huge potential. We already know innovation in Africa is astounding. So how can we accelerate this development through green technology and energy? And in doing so, taking the necessary actions to keeping 1.5 within reach. First, we must address finance. Climate action, just like everything else in life, costs money. Finance should be viewed in the context of mitigation and adaptation, in addition to all of the other things. COP28 will be a critical moment to hold the line on temperature rise at 1.5 degrees Celsius. The world needs to reduce emissions by 43% from 2019 levels by 2030 to achieve this. And the IPCC reports that impacts will be far greater at anything above this, especially in certain parts of the world. So for starters, to hold this off, we immediately need to see the delivery of the pledged $100 billion, a doubling of adaptation finance, the substantial replenishment of the Green Climate Fund, a global finance system, both public and finance, that is aligned with action and green finance.
Africa is the voice of the planet, but it's also the place where humanity came from. And today, knowing that Africa is giving directions on how to save the big house, the planet. However, it is necessary for this voice to be heard, to be extended to the global south. Today here, Latin America is present, the Caribbeans are present, because we are suffering the same challenges as you are. My country this year, as a government, we have had to face a crisis, a very strong crisis, on account of the effects of climate change, floods, which have put in danger the lives of the most vulnerable. But now we have a drought which is starting and which is going to put into danger human life and the life of the fragile ecosystems which form part of this great lung of the world, which is the Amazon and the Pacific region. As we know here, there is another part of this lung of the world, which is the Congo Basin, the region of the Congo, a very strategic region for guaranteeing equilibrium. In this sense, President Gustavo Petro has made several proposals to the world in the United Nations, and today these propositions are placed before you.
History documents that Africa, and Kenya in particular, is the cradle of mankind. It is my hope and prayer that out of the cradle of mankind comes the all-time elusive solution to combating climate change. African-led solutions to decarbonize and steer a low-carbon development pathway for the globe. We are gathered here today to make history as the continent of Africa. The world is facing many challenges, but none has become so apparent, so threatening, and so devastating as the threat of climate change. And we can only respond by making history at this inaugural Africa Climate Summit. Everywhere we look in Africa, there is a climate change-related story to tell. For example, in Malawi, Hurricane Freddy led to the loss of 200 people and nearly $2 billion US dollars worth of damage occasioned. Last year, the Horn of Africa came out of one of the worst droughts in decades, where we lost hundreds of lives and thousands of livestock. In fact, for the first time in Kenya, we had to track water for our wildlife in the national parks and reserves. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, although African countries are making every available effort to deal with the vagaries of climate change, our economies are continuing to be weighed down by mounting debts. As we speak, 31 out of the 37 heavily indebted poor countries in the world are in Africa. Over 20 years of climate change negotiations have yielded agreements and promises that have delivered very little for Africa. Instead, the imagery of Africa as a poor continent, a victim, keep dominating the climate negotiations year in, year out. The fact that Africa has historically contributed very little to the global emissions has remained an inconvenient truth, yet receiving no reciprocity from the rest of the world for the contribution we make. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this inaugural Africa Climate Summit presents an opportunity like no other for Africa to change the course of history. Millions of young Africans are looking up to African leaders here to leave them with a promise, a visible promise, to make them feel that there is a future where they have hope to get green jobs, live a dignified life, and thrive. We are looking to the summit to chart a green growth pathway for the African continent, set the stage for Africa to lead the globe towards a more ecologically responsible global industrialization, catalyzed by financing that is accessible, adequate, and affordable. The world is waiting for something anew out of this week. We must not be held hostage to the past, but allow ourselves to reimagine a future where, as Africa, we lift ourselves from the fatigue of despair and make history. Excellencies, I am persuaded that the time is now, and I beseech us to respond to this historical call by proposing radical solutions to the world that will help us deal with the climate change. I invite us to listen to the inner urge calling us to serve humanity, that we go down in history, that it is out of Africa, the cradle of mankind, that the solution for climate change came forth.